What if the confusion you've been feeling isn't a crisis, but a transformation? What if the discomfort, the silence, the distance from who you used to be are not signs that you're lost, but signs that you're finally waking up? There is a quiet, almost imperceptible moment when you begin to notice that something within you has shifted. It does not arrive with noise or dramatic announcements. Instead, it appears in the spaces between your daily routines, in the subtle discomfort you feel when revisiting places, habits, or conversations that once felt natural. You may find yourself looking at your own life as if you are observing someone else's story, recognizing the patterns, the reactions, and even the desires, but no longer fully identifying with them. It is as if the version of you that once moved through these experiences has gently stepped aside, leaving you in a space where familiarity exists but belonging does not. This disconnection can feel unsettling because it challenges the very foundation of identity. For so long, you have built yourself around certain beliefs, preferences, and roles. You knew what you liked, what you tolerated, what you pursued, and what you avoided, and suddenly, those same things feel distant, almost irrelevant. You might try to reconnect with them, to remind yourself why they once mattered so much, but the emotional resonance is no longer there. What used to bring excitement now feels neutral, and what once felt comfortable may now feel restrictive. This creates an internal tension, a silent conflict between who you have been and who you are becoming. There is also a sense of grief that often accompanies this experience, though it may not be immediately recognizable. It is not grief for something tangible, but for a version of yourself that is slowly dissolving. You may miss the certainty you once had, the clarity of knowing exactly who you were and where you were going. Even if that version of you was limited or conditioned by external expectations, it was at least familiar. Now you stand in a space where the old identity no longer fits, and the new one has not yet fully formed. This in-between state can feel like being suspended between two realities, where neither feels entirely stable. In this process, you may also notice that your reactions begin to change. Situations that once triggered predictable responses now evoke something entirely different. You may become more reflective, less reactive, or even indifferent to things that once held significant emotional weight. This shift can be confusing, not only for you but also for those around you. People who have known you for a long time may expect you to behave in certain ways, to respond according to the version of you they are familiar with. And when you do not, it can create a subtle dissonance in your relationships. You may feel misunderstood or even question yourself, wondering if something is wrong with you for no longer fitting into the expectations that once defined your interactions. At times, you might attempt to return to your old self, to recreate the feelings, motivations, and perspectives that once guided you. You may revisit old routines, reconnect with past environments, or engage in familiar patterns of thinking, hoping to find that sense of alignment again. But instead of comfort, you often encounter resistance. It feels forced, unnatural, like trying to inhabit a space that no longer accommodates who you are. This realization can be both liberating and disorienting, as it confirms that change has already taken place, whether you consciously chose it or not. What makes this experience particularly challenging is the lack of clear direction that accompanies it. You are not simply leaving behind an old identity, you are stepping into the unknown. There are no precise instructions for who you are becoming, no defined structure to guide you through this transition. This uncertainty can create moments of doubt, where you question whether this disconnection is a sign of growth or a sign of losing your way. But beneath that doubt, there is often a quiet awareness that this shift is not random. It is a natural unfolding, a gradual realignment with something deeper and more authentic within you, even if you cannot yet fully articulate what that looks like. There is a subtle but profound shift that occurs when solitude stops feeling like an absence and begins to feel like a presence. At one point, being alone may have carried a quiet discomfort, a sense that something was missing, that connection existed only in the company of others. Silence may have felt heavy, almost unbearable, pushing you to fill it with distractions, conversations, or noise just to avoid facing it. But as this internal transformation unfolds, that same silence begins to change its meaning. It no longer feels empty, it feels full, almost alive, as if it holds something essential that cannot be accessed anywhere else. This need for solitude does not come from rejection or bitterness toward others. It is not about withdrawing out of hurt or disappointment. It emerges from a deeper necessity, a quiet recognition that your inner world is asking for attention. You begin to notice that constant interaction, even when pleasant, starts to feel overwhelming. The opinions, expectations, and energies of others become louder, more intrusive, making it difficult to hear your own thoughts clearly. In response, you are drawn inward, not to escape the world, but to reconnect with yourself in a way that feels grounded and real. In this space of solitude, something begins to reorganize within you. Thoughts that once felt scattered start to settle. Emotions that were previously ignored or suppressed begin to surface, asking to be understood rather than avoided. There is a kind of honesty that emerges when there is no one else to perform for, no roles to maintain, no expectations to fulfill. You are left alone with your own presence, and while that can initially feel unfamiliar, it gradually becomes a place of clarity. You start to see patterns in your behavior, to understand your motivations, and to recognize the subtle ways in which you have shaped your life according to influences that may not have truly belonged to you. This shift can also change the way you experience time. Moments of solitude no longer feel like something to endure, but something to enter fully. You may find yourself lingering in quiet activities, allowing yourself to simply be without the urgency to move on to the next thing. There is a slowing down, a deliberate stepping away from the constant demand for stimulation. In this slowing down, you begin to notice details that were previously overlooked, both within yourself and in the world around you. Your awareness expands, not outward in search of more, but inward in search of depth. At the same time, this growing preference for solitude can create a sense of distance in your relationships. People who are used to your constant availability may not immediately understand why you are pulling back. They may interpret your need for space as disinterest or detachment when in reality, it is neither. It is simply a recalibration, a necessary step in aligning with a version of yourself that requires more intentional connection rather than constant presence. This can create moments of tension, where you feel caught between honoring your own needs and meeting the expectations of others. Yet, the more you lean into this solitude, the more you realize that it is not isolating you, but strengthening your ability to connect in a more meaningful way. As this process deepens, you begin to notice that solitude is no longer something you seek only in certain moments, but something you carry within you. Even when you are around others, there is a part of you that remains centered, undisturbed by the external noise. This internal solitude becomes a kind of anchor, allowing you to engage with the world without losing yourself in it. It is no longer about being physically alone, but about maintaining a connection to your inner space, regardless of your surroundings. And within that space, there is a quiet stability that continues to grow, shaping the way you think, feel, and move through your life. There comes a stage in your inner transformation where certainty begins to dissolve, not because you have lost your ability to believe, but because you have started to see how much of what you believed was never truly examined. Ideas that once felt solid, unquestionable, and even comforting begin to feel fragile under the weight of your awareness. You start to notice that many of your convictions were not consciously chosen, but quietly absorbed over time, shaped by family, culture, environment, and repeated exposure. What once felt like truth now feels like something inherited, something you carried without ever asking if it truly belonged to you. This questioning does not appear as a sudden rebellion, but as a slow, persistent curiosity. It shows up in ordinary moments when you catch yourself following a routine and wonder why it exists, or when you hear an opinion you once agreed with and feel an unexpected resistance. You begin to ask deeper questions, not just about the world around you, but about your own internal landscape. Why do you define success in a particular way? Why do certain fears hold so much power over your decisions? Why do you pursue goals that, when achieved, do not bring the fulfillment you expected? These questions can feel unsettling because they do not always come with immediate answers, and they often lead you into areas of uncertainty where clarity is replaced by exploration. As this process unfolds, you may notice a growing discomfort with automatic thinking. Patterns that once operated in the background of your mind now come into focus, revealing how often you react based on conditioning rather than conscious choice. You begin to see how easily beliefs can shape perception, influencing not only how you interpret the world, but also how you interpret yourself. This awareness can create a sense of instability, as if the ground beneath your understanding is shifting. The frameworks that once gave you a sense of order no longer feel reliable, and in their place, there is a space that feels open but undefined. This openness can be both liberating and disorienting. On one hand, it allows you to step outside of limitations that you may not have even realized were there. You begin to see possibilities that were previously hidden by rigid thinking, and you gain the freedom to redefine your values, priorities, and perspectives. On the other hand, this same openness removes the comfort of certainty. Without fixed answers, you're left navigating a landscape where questions lead to more questions, and where the process of understanding becomes more important than the need to conclude. In this stage, you may also find yourself re-evaluating the influences in your life. The sources of information you once trusted without hesitation may now be examined with a more critical eye. You become more selective, not out of skepticism for its own sake, but out of a desire for authenticity. You want to understand the origins of what you believe, to trace ideas back to their roots, and determine whether they align with your evolving sense of truth. This can lead to a period of detachment from certain perspectives, conversations, or even environments that no longer support your need for depth and clarity. At times, this questioning can feel isolating, especially when those around you continue to operate within the frameworks you are beginning to challenge. You may find it difficult to fully express what you are experiencing, not because it lacks meaning, but because it is still in the process of forming. There is a gap between what you are starting to understand and what you can clearly articulate, and within that gap, you may feel a sense of distance from others who are not navigating the same internal shift. Yet beneath that distance, there is also a growing sense of alignment, a quiet recognition that this process is guiding you toward a deeper and more conscious way of engaging with both yourself and the world around you. There is a moment in this inner transformation when your emotional world begins to expand in ways that are difficult to explain. It is not simply that you feel more, it is that you feel differently. Emotions that once passed quickly or remained unnoticed now linger, asking for your attention. A piece of music can move you in unexpected ways. A simple conversation can stay with you long after it ends. And even small shifts in someone's tone or energy can become deeply perceptible. It is as if a layer of numbness has been removed, revealing a level of awareness that was always present but never fully experienced. At first, this heightened sensitivity can feel overwhelming. You may question whether you are becoming too fragile, too affected by things that others seem to navigate with ease. Situations that once felt manageable may now carry a weight that is difficult to ignore. You might find yourself needing more time to process experiences, more space to understand your reactions, and more distance from environments that feel emotionally intense or draining. This can create a sense of vulnerability, as if you are more exposed to the world around you, less protected by the emotional barriers that once kept things at a comfortable distance. As you begin to observe this shift more closely, you may notice that it is not only your own emotions that are becoming more vivid, but also your awareness of others. You start to pick up on subtle cues that you may have previously overlooked: the unspoken tension in a room, the hidden sadness behind someone's words, the quiet joy in a moment that might seem insignificant to others. This increased perception can deepen your empathy, allowing you to connect with people on a level that feels more genuine and less superficial. At the same time, it can also make it more challenging to ignore negativity as you become more attuned to the emotional undercurrents that exist beneath the surface of interactions. This sensitivity often brings with it a re-evaluation of what you allow into your life. You may find that certain environments, conversations, or even forms of entertainment no longer feel aligned with your state of awareness. What once seemed harmless or enjoyable may now feel draining or overwhelming, not because it has changed, but because your capacity to perceive its impact has grown. This can lead to a gradual shift in your preferences as you begin to seek out experiences that feel nourishing rather than depleting, authentic rather than performative. It is not about rejecting the world, but about choosing how you engage with it in a way that honors your emotional clarity. There is also a deeper layer to this sensitivity that relates to your relationship with yourself. As your awareness expands, you become less able to ignore your own internal signals. Feelings that you might have previously suppressed or dismissed now demand recognition. You begin to notice when something does not feel right, even if you cannot immediately explain why. This internal honesty can be uncomfortable, as it removes the ability to distract yourself from what you truly feel. Yet, it also creates an opportunity for greater self-understanding, as you learn to listen to your emotions not as obstacles, but as information. Over time, this increased sensitivity begins to reshape the way you move through the world. You become more intentional in your actions, more aware of the impact of your words, and more selective in where you invest your energy. The intensity that once felt overwhelming starts to reveal its purpose, showing you aspects of life that were previously hidden beneath layers of distraction or indifference. And while this heightened awareness can still bring moments of discomfort, it also carries a depth of experience that allows you to engage with life in a way that feels more present, more connected, and more real. There is a gradual but unmistakable shift that occurs when your relationship with connection begins to change. It does not happen all at once, nor does it come with a clear decision to distance yourself from others. Instead, it emerges quietly, almost without your permission, as a subtle dissatisfaction with interactions that once felt normal. Conversations that revolve around appearances, status, or repetitive patterns begin to feel empty, as if they are moving on the surface of something much deeper that remains untouched. You may find yourself participating out of habit, nodding, responding, even smiling, yet internally feeling disconnected, as though a part of you is no longer present in the exchange. This disconnection is not rooted in judgment toward others, but in a growing awareness of what you truly need from human interaction. You begin to recognize that not all connection is equal and that proximity does not guarantee meaning. Being surrounded by people no longer fulfills you in the same way if the interactions lack depth or authenticity. You start to notice how often conversations are driven by the need to impress, to conform, or to avoid vulnerability. And once you see this pattern, it becomes difficult to unsee it. What once felt engaging may now feel repetitive, predictable, and ultimately unsatisfying. As this awareness deepens, your tolerance for superficiality begins to diminish. Small talk, which once served as a comfortable bridge between people, may now feel like a barrier that prevents anything real from emerging. You may find yourself longing for conversations that go beyond the expected scripts, where honesty replaces performance and curiosity replaces assumption. This desire for depth is not about intensity for its own sake, but about sincerity. You want to understand and be understood in a way that feels genuine, without the need to filter or adjust yourself to fit into predefined roles. This shift can naturally lead to a reduction in the number of connections you maintain. Relationships that were built on convenience, shared environments, or unexamined habits may begin to fade, not through conflict, but through a quiet lack of resonance. You may notice that certain interactions feel draining rather than energizing, leaving you with a sense of emptiness instead of fulfillment. In response, you begin to withdraw from those spaces, not out of rejection, but out of a desire to preserve your energy for connections that feel more aligned with who you are becoming. At the same time, this process can bring moments of loneliness, not because you are incapable of connection, but because you are no longer willing to settle for connections that lack meaning. There is a period where the old relationships no longer fit, and the new ones have not yet fully formed. In this space, you may question whether your expectations are too high, whether you are asking for something that is difficult to find. Yet, beneath that doubt, there is a quiet certainty that what you are seeking is not unrealistic, but simply requires a different level of openness and presence, both from yourself and from others. As you continue to move through this shift, you may begin to notice that the connections you do form start to change in quality. Even if they are fewer, they carry a different kind of depth, where conversations flow more naturally and where there is less need to perform or prove anything. These interactions may feel more grounding, more honest, and more reflective of your inner world. You become more attentive, more present, and more willing to engage in ways that go beyond the surface, creating a space where real connection can emerge without force or pretense. There is a particular kind of tension that arises when you begin to outgrow the life you once felt safe in. It is not loud or dramatic, but steady and persistent, like a quiet pull in two opposite directions. One part of you longs for what is familiar, for the routines, environments, and choices that once provided a sense of stability. This part seeks reassurance, predictability, and the comfort of knowing what comes next. At the same time, another part of you begins to resist that very same familiarity, sensing that it no longer reflects who you are becoming. This internal conflict does not always present itself as a clear decision, but rather as a continuous hesitation, where every step forward feels both necessary and uncertain. This tension can be confusing because both sides feel valid. The desire for comfort is not weakness. It is a natural inclination towards safety, shaped by past experiences and reinforced by repetition. It reminds you of what has worked before, what has protected you, what has given you a sense of identity. Yet the pull toward growth carries a different kind of truth. It does not offer guarantees or clear outcomes, but it brings with it a sense of expansion, a subtle awareness that staying where you are may no longer be enough. These two forces coexist within you, creating a dynamic where movement feels both possible and restrained at the same time. As this conflict deepens, you may notice it appearing in different areas of your life. Decisions that once felt straightforward now require more reflection. Opportunities that would have once excited you may now bring hesitation, not because they lack value, but because they challenge the version of yourself that is still attached to what is known. You may find yourself standing at the edge of change, aware of the direction you could take, yet unable to fully commit. This hesitation is not simply fear, but a process of internal negotiation, where different parts of you are trying to reconcile their needs and perspectives. In this space, you may also become more aware of the cost of staying the same. What once felt comfortable can begin to feel limiting, not in an obvious way, but in a subtle sense of stagnation. You may notice a lack of fulfillment, a feeling that something within you is not being expressed or explored. This awareness does not immediately eliminate the desire for comfort, but it complicates it, making it harder to fully return to a state of unconscious ease. The more you recognize the potential for growth, the more difficult it becomes to ignore it, even if acting on it requires stepping into uncertainty. At the same time, the path toward growth is rarely clear. It does not come with precise instructions or guaranteed results. It asks for trust in something that is still forming, for movement without complete understanding. This can create moments of doubt where you question whether the pull you feel is worth the risk, whether the discomfort of change will lead to something meaningful or simply disrupt what you already have. These questions are part of the process, reflecting the natural resistance that arises when you move beyond what is known into what is possible. Within this ongoing conflict, there is also an opportunity to develop a different kind of awareness. Instead of viewing comfort and growth as opposing forces that require an immediate resolution, you begin to see them as aspects of a larger process. Comfort shows you where you have been, where you have built stability and familiarity. Growth points toward where you are capable of going, where new experiences and perspectives await. The tension between them becomes less about choosing one over the other and more about understanding how they interact within you, shaping the pace and direction of your transformation.